Hello everyone. So I'm just going to talk quickly through how we plan for a question 5 paper 2 response, because I know that we always talk about planning and sometimes it might take us quite a while to do it, but I thought I'd just show you just quickly the key things we need to think about and how we can do it quickly. So I've uploaded already the question, and this is a slightly different question for the example I've already given you, so you just might need to take a second to just read through it. I'm not going to read through it all for you. You can pause this video and read for yourselves. Now, things we need to think about when you're given the actual task itself. You need to think, is it a speech, is it a news article, or is it a letter? They're usually the main three things you're asked to do. Now, the bulk of your writing will be the same regardless. It's just with a speech, they're written to be performed verbally. So there needs to be a better emphasis, I would say, on your shorter paragraphs. So where are you going to pause or slow the tempo down so your audience has time to think about something? So ellipsis and shorter paragraphing are usually clear signs that this is maybe a speech rather than a news article. All right, that's just one tip I might give you for how you might change it up. Another thing then, are you being asked to argue, persuade, or explain your point of view? Now, explain and argue are pretty similar with each other. The argument tends to be quite balanced, usually. Whereas when you're persuading somebody, it needs to be an uneven argument. With that being said, however, because obviously here you're trying to convince somebody to follow your way of thinking or to do something. But either way, you still need to look at your sides of the argument. So here, for this question here then, so these are just the arguments I came up with for for. These are the arguments I came up with for against. So I'll just give you a second to read through them if you want to pause. Okay, so as I write my answer up, okay, I tend to tick off the things that I've said as I'm writing them. So I might decide to use more extreme sort of language or exaggeration to start off with. I might talk about how we're exploiting the vulnerable, and the vulnerable could be any one of us who are around us. So I might start my argument with that. So then once I've said that in my answer, I tick it off. However, I don't always have to stick rigidly to everything I've planned in the first 10 minutes. If you're writing and you find, well, actually, we learn from our mistakes, while we might be able to say that, is that specifically arguing for this statement? I don't know if that's a strong enough argument to use, so I might decide not to use that one. But the difference is between this and not planning is I've actively thought in my head, well, I'm going to use this argument instead. But if you haven't got this information in front of you, you can't make those decisions as effectively. And if you're doing it off the top of your head, the chances are you're not going to stick to this as closely as you probably could. Alright, so make sure you are doing a quick plan. The next thing I think about are my techniques. Now, you don't have to list every single aforest and imp technique before you start writing, because the chances are they're going to be quite shoehorned into your response, and you want it to flow quite freely, because remember, the main thing you're trying to do is express your viewpoint. So how you feel about something and how you see something and how different people have different viewpoints. That's the main point of this task. Aforest shows viewpoints. That's the point of it. Alright, it's not just having loads of disjointed language features, but they serve a purpose. Now, I do, however, plan what I think the most effective techniques will be. So I just think off the top of my head, what things am I going to say to show some of my arguments on the previous page? So I might ask the rhetorical question, Is this, meaning gambling, daylight robbery? So daylight robbery, it's a popular phrase for when people don't even try and hide the fact that something's a rip-off. Okay, so if you didn't know that, that's what that phrase means. Sometimes I might use familiar phrases to build a sense of trust between myself and the reader or the audience members, because while yes you've got to use ambitious vocabulary, while you need to show skill, you've got to kind of splice it, so like include familiar phrases as well, so you don't lose your audience members. If all of your writing is full of jargon, so like subject specialist language, you might lose people halfway through, and you've got to make sure that you're still keeping them engaged. All right, if at any point you're reading back through your work and think, I'm starting to get bored now, or I'm starting to lose the focus, if you're thinking that as the writer, the audience members will definitely feel like that as well. So it's really important that you keep them engaged. So that's why you've still got to use some familiar language in this answer. Now, something else, so a sentence I thought of that I might use then about the exploiting the vulnerable. We are putting our most vulnerable into financial jeopardy. That one short sentence has included 3 of these techniques naturally. It's an opinion, it's exaggeration, I'm being over the top, and I'm using inclusive pronouns, we. So you'll notice anyway, as you're writing and showing your viewpoint, you are kind of using a lot of these already. So that's what I mean. Think more about specific sentences you're going to use that will show your viewpoints, and you'll notice that these will start to be ticked off naturally anyway. Thinking of my structure then, so I don't want everyone in the year group to use the same structure for this because it will be boring. So it's up to you on how you structure your answers. However, if you're somebody that struggles to do this, what I would do is I would make sure my opening and ending are linked together. Alright, so circular narratives, you might repeat the same sentence at the beginning and the end. You might give somebody an imaginary scenario, so imagine you are a poor desperate person spending their last 50 pence on the last horse race of the day, hoping to claw back their lost earnings. I might use that as my first sentence. I might give my argument, and then at the very end I might say, can you now imagine that person with their 50 pence, and are you okay with just leaving them to go home by themselves? Do you see what I mean? So I might give an imaginary scenario and then come back to it at the end. I also think about how my sentences might start as well, because it's important that not all of your sentences are just starting with the, a, they, them, those. Alright, you've got to think of different ways of opening your sentences. So if you want to impress your examiners, and if you don't necessarily want to use these 2 techniques, you might just start with 3 fragmented sentences, so 3 separate adjectives on their own. Isolated, desperate, penniless. These are the first 3 descriptions we use when describing our gambling addicts. So again, I'm giving quite a strong opinion there, aren't I? I'm purposely sounding harsh because then I might be showing that how people treat gambling addicts are quite harsh, and perhaps we need to soften our approach. So that's another way we might start. The reason I've talked about openings quite a bit is because your opening is the thing that will grip your readers or audience members. You've got to think, how am I going to draw them in? How am I going to make them interested in what I'm saying? So it's really important you think about that. So just a few other things we need to think about then, just before I finish. So paragraphing, so it needs to be long paragraphs and short paragraphs. We don't just do one slab of writing. If you do just one slab of writing, you are capped at 10 out of 24 marks, which is a grade 3. Alright, you've got to use paragraphing, there is no option, so it's really important. At the start of your more detailed paragraphs, you need to use connectives at the beginning of them. Now, if you're somebody that forgets how to do this, or you forget to do it as you're writing, a bit naughty of me to say this, but tell your examiners to F off 3 times. Firstly, furthermore, finally. Alright, so if you're someone that struggles with this, just think, I'm going to use the 3 Fs by the time I've finished my writing. And then that way you're getting that mark for linking your ideas together. And then in between those, I might put short paragraphs. Okay, so I might repeat the same question. Do you think this is a serious issue yet? Furthermore, talk about a different argument. Do you think this is a serious issue yet? There are lots of different ways you can structure. Just quickly before I finish, other things you need to think about then. You need to think about punctuation marks. Okay? Now, don't overuse exclamation marks. I personally only use one. The more you use these, the less effective they are. So use one so you've got variety, but don't overuse them. Use ellipsis for prolonged pauses, especially when you've got a speech. If you're introducing a list, use a colon. You can see that I've just used brackets for additional information. So again, you don't have to plan all of the punctuation you're going to use before you start writing, but just bear in mind, if you've written half a page and there's only full stops and commas, you've got to go back and you've got to make sure you've included a variety. You get more marks for that. And then finally, okay, make sure that you are focused on the question. I know that sounds really obvious, but already I've lost count of the amount of times that people have come up with ideas that our heads are bubbling. They're thinking, oh, okay, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about that, oh, this would be a really nice link. And half a page later, they're not answering the question. And if you're not answering the question, and if it isn't consistent all the way through, you can't move to that level 3 clear communication. And certainly, if your target grade is a 5 or above, which I know a lot of yours are, you need to always be in the level 3 communication. So if you have any other questions, if you just drop me a message and let me know. But this is how I would personally get around planning. Now, I know I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I always say 10 minutes or fewer, and this has taken me a little bit longer, but obviously I've been talking you through. If I were just doing this in my head, this probably would have taken me probably about 8 minutes. Okay? Thank you.